Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. Today is a Comprehensivist Wednesday that we do in association with the Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society. And today I'm going to be talking about the 12 virtues of rationality. And I'm going to try to map them into the diagram that I've been using. So I'm going to first talk very briefly about the diagram, just an overview. If you're not familiar, most of the people here are familiar with the diagram. In its various stages, I've done about 16 different meetups on it so far. But if you're not familiar, I'm going to give a very quick overview, and I'm going to be focusing on one aspect of the diagram today. I want to highlight that. And then we're going to dive deep into this essay of Yudkowsky. And during that time, I'll be making comments about the correspondence between the diagram and the different virtues of rationality. I'm going to do a follow-up meetup on virtues, which is going to be the proper meetup on virtues, which will cover all of virtues traditionally that the Western civilization has been focused on. And that's going to be on Sunday at 2 p.m. All right, so let me get started. I'm going to share the screen and I'm going to talk about the diagram. Okay. All right, so this is the diagram. I'm calling it Love the Center diagram. So the center here is universal principles. It is God, it is the Tao, it is the Brahma, it is the Atma. It is the universal principles which shape everything. So that's right here. Now, I want to say a couple of things here. I want to focus on this loop that I have here, this heart-shaped loop. What I'm saying, as best as I understand the world, it's all about listening to the center, seeing the center, taking in, accepting nature, accepting reality, and that is listening, and then speaking. So this is, the loop is of two parts. This is listening, and this is speaking. Each of those parts has two parts. When you're speaking from the center, the best understanding you have of the world, and you are building your life. You're building things as per that. In Louis Sullivan's terms, the center is the function. You're creating a form that follows the function. That is the build part of the cycle. Now, unfortunately, all of us get caught up in what we have built, and we drift with our habits, with our thoughts, with our emotions. So that is this part. And in so doing, we go away from the function. We get attached to the forms. When we realize that we have done that, we have a choice of saying no to the distance between us and the center, and giving up the things which are not coming directly from the center. We come back to this. This circle over here is the living circle. And once you have come back to it, you focus on the center again to recreate, to reimagine, to resurrect, to create a new idea. And then you build that out. Now, you don't necessarily have to go through this entire cycle. If you are continuously focused on the center, once you have built the form, you can use one of these other loops to come back to the center. That is, and to listen again. But you have to continuously, this is a loop of speaking and listening, creating and observing. We looked at, on Sunday, we did a meetup, and Joe asked me a question about order and chaos. And I gave the example of Osiris, the story of Osiris. So let me go through that. That will be the quickest way to demonstrate what this means. Osiris was a great king who built the great Egyptian civilization. So that is like this. He was married to Isis. Isis is the source of life. It's the creative factor. So that is the same as this. So it is like this. So them together built the living Egyptian civilization. So Osiris was going like this, and Isis was providing the feedback. But this great king became older. As he grew older, he got set in his ways. So he's over here, and he gets set in his ways. So he's holding on. He becomes blind. He can't see anymore. And he goes down like this. He's drifted down. And when you're blind, you do not see the difference between what is living and what is not living and what is actually killing life. So he had a brother, Seth, who was right here at the end, who was against the center, who was all he wanted to do was to use the products of civilization that Osiris had built to his own. He didn't want to create anything new. He just wanted to co-opt the product. So he killed Osiris. Osiris could not see him, could not understand him, because he was blind. He was set in his ways. He was just focused on what he had done. That's why he fell prey to Seth, who was here. So Seth killed Osiris and took his pieces and threw them all over the underworld. Now Isis, which is the creative force and the wife of Osiris, was angry, obviously. So she went back to the underworld, got a piece of Osiris, and recreated his son Horus. Now Horus, being the progeny of both Osiris and Isis, could see. He grew up, he killed Seth, he went back, got all the pieces of Osiris, and brought him back to Egypt. He gave him one of his eyes, which was what he was missing. See, this eye is being able to see the center of freshly see, fresh awareness. Horus is represented by the eye. And they ruled Egypt. So that is the story of Osiris. If you want one more example, take Gospel of John that we've been studying. This part is the Garden of Eden, where life is as per the center. This is the fall of man, when he gets attached to the fruit of the tree without being able to actually tend to the tree. He's just trying to get the fruits without taking the responsibility. And this is where he ends up. And the solution is giving up. It's the sacrifice. It's moving back towards the center. This is the crucifixion, and this is the resurrection, which recreates new life, and then thereby builds the city of God. So this is the same loop. This is the Bible story, just like this is the Osiris story. And this captures some fundamental things about the human experience. You can see that there are these 4 circles. We can use the archetypes of Jung to talk about them. This is the hero that is creating the world, that is building the world anew. This right here. But he's made possible by this child, which is the curiosity of seeing things afresh. So the child is the father of the man. And without that continual curiosity, the world becomes, you become old, you become what Jung calls senex. This is old man who is set in his ways. He says, in our olden days, we didn't use these little things like square things. What do you do this? So all kinds of things, you're getting set in your ways. That is the senex. And this is the demon where you're turning your back on life itself. So you can think of it in terms of consciousness. This is pure consciousness. The child is pure consciousness, pure curiosity, pure wanting to know. Hero uses the consciousness in order to recreate life. The senex is no longer conscious. He's just focused on whatever it is that he has. The actions, the thoughts, the emotions. And this demon actually turns the back on the light, on the center. He is anti-conscious. He is evading, actively evading. So these are different stages of consciousness. So that's what the diagram does. Now, if anybody has any quick questions about the diagram, I'm happy to take them, but try to keep the questions very brief. You can ask any question that you want, but just try to keep it brief. Go ahead and type !" in chat or raise your hand in Zoom if you'd like to ask a question. Okay, Avanique, go ahead.
I have a question. So with this circle, create, build, drift, destroy, are all these stages necessary in life? Because the way I see it is, from what we talked about Sunday, you start off from the center, you build, and then you drift, and then you destroy. But destruction, we said on Sunday, is necessary for creation. So are all these necessary?
Okay, excellent question. The answer is no, because what happens is that you see all these, by the way, all these other lines that you see are just 8 such loops pointed this, and you can point it in different ways. So for example, you see that this heart is exactly in the opposite direction as the other one. And there are 8 of these. What you have is that you have the ability of returning to the center at every point of time. So you can, as you're thinking, for example, here, you can go back to the center. So you can be operating within your own character. This is domain of your character. This is the domain of your life. This is the domain of the culture. And this is the larger domain of nature. So this is like different domains in which you can operate, and you can come back at any point. So you can, like, for example, when Egypt was prospering, it was Osiris doing this and Isis giving a feedback, or with her on his side, he was cognizant, he was aware of what life was telling him. So if, as long as you're doing that, you can implement the form follows function. See, the principle inside this loop is inside life, living is form follows function. So the forms are being created this way. As long as you keep focused on the center, as long as you keep focused on the function, you can always go back. Sometimes you can overshoot a little bit and you can say, oh, I overshot. This is really not necessary. And then you correct yourself right here. You don't have to go all the way towards, this is the rock bottom. You don't have to go all the way towards the rock bottom. But listening requires fresh consciousness. Just like speaking requires the will to exert all the effort needed to transform the world. So as long as you are conscious, you don't have to go all the way, because these are all different stages of consciousness. This is unconscious, and this one is anti-conscious or evading. So you don't have to go all the way all the time, but there is a propensity that we all have of drifting, because that is effortless, that is going downhill. Going uphill requires purpose, requires will and effort. And these are the words I'm using. This is of describing these four parts of this cycle: that you create the child, you build the hero, you drift, and then you destroy or recreate. This destruction is basically, let me explain that word. Another way of looking at it is, you can think of it in terms of Bhagavad Gita. This is Brahma, the god of creation. This is Vishnu, the god of sustenance. And this is Shiva, the god of destruction or transformation. What happens is that when you have drifted, there are going to be many things in your life. Your thoughts, your emotions, your actions, your intuitions, which are not going to be pointed towards the center, but they are going to be away from the center. And you have to let go of those things to create the space for new growth. If you do not let go of these, then you will, then you can't grow. Okay, let me go ahead and stop sharing. And I'm going to now start with Yudkowsky's piece here. Let me see. Is this the right one? Nope. Right. Okay, so what I want to do is, this is going to be the main part. So far, it was just an introduction to my diagram. So I want to go through this presentation. So first question is, why have I chosen this? What I'm doing is that I am looking at different systems of thought, which I have learned a lot from, and I'm trying to integrate it with my diagram. So I did that with Louis Sullivan. I did that with Bhagavad Gita. Now I'm doing it with Yudkowsky. Yudkowsky, this essay is really remarkable for its shortness and how much it covers. Now, when you compare it to the diagram, my diagram has four parts: the blue part, which is thinking, the red part, which is feelings, there is the green part, which is action or sensory, and then there is the purple part or magenta part, which is the intuition. This focuses on rationality. This focuses on the blue. But you can see how different aspects seep into that, how all virtues are one. Though we are focused primarily here on virtue of rationality, 12 virtues of rationality, hopefully we'll see some connections between this and the diagram. So I'm going to ask for some volunteers to read. The first part I'm going to read, Shane Murray, you had a question. Give me just a second. Let me go ahead and enable this. Yes, Shane Murray, go ahead.
Okay, so I was, with your diagram, I'm curious of how it relates to the ideal or to God. So in essence, I noticed that it seems to be that movement is required. Oh,
Yeah, I mean, the center is the God.
right. But so for an individual, for a human, there's movement is required. Life requires that movement. It's cyclical. And I was curious, it seems that maybe even for the ideal or for God, because in theory, if we accept that idea that God also creates order from chaos. So is there no steady state even for the ideal, meaning is there constant evolution, if you will, towards creation and building and that kind of thing?
Yes, so I'm very close to I think of it, the most comprehensive answer to that I find in Bhagavad Gita, which is what I'm most closest to in terms of my way of thinking. The center is simply universal principles. The center expresses itself. Everything else is a manifestation of the center. So that entire diagram is the universe, whereas so it's not like center versus the periphery. It is the center which is shaping the periphery. Center is simply the life force that is in living things. So just like you cannot separate out life in a living being, the center is the center of the whole. So that's the relationship. But we can come back to this after the presentation. And but a very good question. So it is so the way in which Bhagavad Gita deals with it is that they will say that the Brahma expresses itself in Prakriti. A way in which Tao says, in Tao Te Ching says it, is that Tao creates the 10,000 things. So there is this relationship between the center and the periphery. The center is driving the periphery. And us in the center, us as part of reality, as conscious human beings, what we can do and what we should do is to understand the center, to love the center, and to act from it. So understand the universal principles that are shaping everything, including ourselves, and act in accordance with that. All right, so let me now dive into Yudkowsky. So what we're going to do, the format is there are 12 virtues. I'm going to start with the 12th virtue because Yudkowsky says that is the first virtue. That is virtue before all other virtues. And I'm going to read that, and then I'm going to ask for volunteers to read other virtues. Go ahead and type a R if you would like to read of one of the virtues. So let me just tell you what I have done here. So I've divided them into groups. I did a presentation with a friend on this topic maybe 1.5 years ago, and we divided it into these. So there are 4 groups. First is the nameless virtue, which has only one virtue in it. And then there are 3 groups. Virtues pertaining to understanding the world, virtues pertaining to being less wrong, and virtues pertaining to holding yourself to high standards. Okay, so that's the format we're going to follow. So I'm going to read out this one first. Nameless virtue. Miyamoto Musashi wrote in the book of 5 rings, the primary thing when you take a sword in your hands is your intention to cut the enemy, whatever the means. Whenever you parry, hit, spring, strike, or touch the enemy's cutting sword, you must cut the enemy in the same movement. It is essential to attain this. If you think only of hitting, springing, striking, or touching the enemy, you will not be able to actually cut him. More than anything, you must be thinking of carrying your movement through to cutting him. So what it's saying is that it's the center that counts. You need to keep your focus on the center. And all the virtues that we are talking about, we're going to be talking about 11 other virtues, are like movements like parrying or striking or hitting or touching. Though we are describing them separately, they are actually one. And unless you see the oneness of them and operate like that, by moving towards the center, you will not be able to actually master any virtue. This is a very large theme throughout the discussion of virtue. In the presentation of virtue in the 103 Great Ideas, this is one of the key points. The point is virtue one or is it many? So it is the one in the many. And you have to have that in your mind. And I call it, loving the center, of making sure that all your thoughts, your emotions, your actions, your intuitions are pointed that way. And they work together to move towards that. Every step of your reasoning must cut through to the correct answer in the same movement. More than anything, you must think of carrying your map through to reflecting the territory. If for many years you practice the technique and submit yourself to strict constraints, it may be that you will glimpse the center. Okay, so this is the same idea. This is the idea. This is from the Taoist tradition of the Tao, that you are acting according to the Tao. That is the way of acting. So this is Wu Wei. Then you will see how all techniques are one technique, and you will move correctly without feeling constrained. Musashi wrote, when you appreciate the power of nature, knowing the rhythm of any situation, you will be able to hit the enemy naturally and strike naturally. All this is the way of the void. So this is another way of describing Wu Wei. So coming, this unity of this. So when the reason I put this in the beginning, this is the 12th virtue in the sequence. Reason I've put it in the beginning is that this is the context. We're going to read it again at the end. Because you can't really get anything from any of the virtues unless you keep in mind that all of it has to come towards the center. And they are all one in a very deep way, right? So now we're going to go to the virtues one by one. We'll have somebody read the virtue. If you would like to volunteer to read the virtue, go ahead and type R in the chat. And after one of the virtues is read, then I'll make some comments and then I'll open it up for comments from anybody on that virtue. I want to try to keep your comments brief because I want to go through all of them, all 12 virtues, and then look at the picture that emerges from it. All right, so next we're going to go to the first group, and that's going to be about understanding the world. And the first virtue there is curiosity. So let me see. So we will start with Katie. So it's going to be Katie. Katie, go ahead.
The first virtue is curiosity. A burning itch to know is higher than a solemn vow to pursue truth. To feel the burning itch of curiosity requires both that you be ignorant and that you desire to relinquish your ignorance. If in your heart you believe you already know, or if in your heart you do not wish to know, then your questioning will be purposeless and your skills without direction. Curiosity seeks to annihilate itself. There is no curiosity that does not want an answer. The glory of glorious mystery is to be solved, after which it ceases to be mystery. Be wary of those who speak of being open-minded and modestly confess their ignorance. There's a time to confess your ignorance and a time to relinquish your.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Katie. So I'll make some comments, and if anybody wants to add anything, just go ahead and type exclamation mark in chat. So it says, the first virtue is curiosity. A burning itch to know is higher than a solemn vow to pursue truth. Now, this itch to know is basically the child in you. That is kind of the beginning of consciousness, of the beginning of awareness. So again, the statement, the child is the father of the man. The solemn vow is a more adult thing. It rests on this genuine desire to know. So this is connecting the child. So it's like you can't really be a hero unless you are a child. That sustaining curiosity is necessary for continue to build life. So this is the lesson from the death of Osiris. Like whenever he loses that curiosity, that's when he starts to drift down. To feel the burning itch of curiosity requires both that you be ignorant and that you desire to relinquish your ignorance. So now what he's saying, see, this is actually, he's very, very good. He's saying, he's looking at all kinds of pretensions that people have, and he's separating the real thing from those. So firstly, he says, okay, let me continue. If in your heart you believe you already know, and if in your heart you do not wish to know, then your questioning will be purposeless and your skills without direction. So you can't just say that I don't know, but you should, like you can't believe in your heart that you know, because then that is going to actually stop you. So this is the part of destruction. You have to know that you don't know. You have to admit that you don't know. And that's a prerequisite of creation. So this is connecting the destruction part of the curve to the creation part of the curve. Curiosity seeks to annihilate itself. There is no curiosity that does not want an answer. Now, this is very important. You are actually trying to know. More than that, you're trying to figure things out so that you can act in the world. So it is not, and you have to realize that you try to understand things as best as you can, and then you act on it, and you want that action to be as good as possible. So in that sense, you have killed the curiosity. At the same time, the cycle goes on. That is going to create a new situation. The world is going to keep changing, and you have to maintain the curiosity. So a fake curiosity is to just say, oh, I don't know, while in your heart thinking that you know. The curiosity that he's talking about is going through these cycles again and again and again and again, where you keep building your knowledge, keep doing more and more things, yet remain aware of your limitations and be quick to accept them, to acknowledge them. So there is a time to confess your ignorance and time to relinquish your ignorance. So this is important of saying, just like it is important to have curiosity, it is important to have the reasoning to try to figure it out as best as you can. So he's saying, don't just be a child, be a hero as well. You need, and that is going to kill that particular curiosity in the sense that is going to be fulfilled, and there is going to be more. So it's a profoundly open kind of an approach to living. Would love any comments you have. Just go ahead and type exclamation mark if you'd like to comment. Joe.
Yeah, I found this interesting on a number of levels, but specifically one of the points that you had already talked about is the idea of false humility in the process, that you have to be sincere. You have to have a really open mind and be willing to abandon your beliefs. Because if you're unable to abandon your beliefs, then you're actually going to be, then you have a fixed mindset that you're already going in with the answers, that you not only have to relinquish your ignorance or your desire, like you have to actually embrace it. And so this idea that you're actually taking this and looking at it from a virtuous standpoint, I look at it as humility and courage as well, because this takes a lot of courage. So if I'm thinking about this on a more at a higher level. Anyway, those are just some brief. I know you want us to be brief about it.
Thank you, Joe. Next up is Maritza.
Shrikant, and this, I really like the manner in which this virtue is expressed here, because it gives the notion that this is almost a virtue over which one doesn't quite have the choice. Now, one can choose to ignore it, but the way he uses like the even though just a picture painted by the words, the burning itch, the feel this requirement, and it does sum up, I think, quite perfectly. It brings to mind the image of this is a virtue that lives so deep within you that it is not a matter of choice. One is engaging in this virtue almost without realizing that one is doing so, as one is seeking to assuage that itch of curiosity, which I really like this one.
Wonderful. I recommend people, I've done several meetups on this in person. And so one thing I recommend is that try to keep a tab of which virtues you think you're strong at and which virtues of rationality you are weak at. So the strongest and the weakest. So you try to distinguish them. That's very useful, and we'll come back to that. All right, let's go to the next virtue, and it's going to be Joe. Joe, go ahead.
Sure. Empiricism. The roots of knowledge are in observation, and its fruits is prediction. What tree grows without roots? What tree nourishes us without fruit? If a tree falls in a forest and no one hears it, does it make a sound? One says, yes, it does, for it makes vibrations in the air. Another says, no, it does not, for there is no auditory processing in any brain. Though they argue, one saying yes, one saying no, the two do not anticipate any different experience of the forest. Do not ask which beliefs to profess, but which experiences to anticipate. Always know which difference of experience you argue about. Do not let the argument wander and become about something else, such as someone's virtue as a rationalist. Jerry Clever said, what does you in is not a failure to apply some high level, intricate, complicated technique. It's overlooking the basics, not keeping your eye on the ball. Do not be blinded by words. When words are subtracted, anticipation remains.
Wonderful. Thank you, Joe. The point that really stands in my mind here is that the purpose of thinking is to actually act. And anticipation or prediction is the middle term. So you're trying to understand the world, understand life, so that you can anticipate, you can predict what is expected, which serves as the guiding principle for your action. So there is that loop. So always keeping in mind that it is all about moving from thinking to action. The thinking is your guidance mechanism for action, and keeping all that in mind all the time while thinking is, I think, that's what really stands out for me over here. So that's the connection between the thinking and the sensing quadrants. All right, does anybody want to comment on this? Okay, we can go further. I think I skipped a virtue. Did not mean to do that. Sorry, Joe, you didn't get to read humility, but it's going to be Brian or Penny. Just a second, let me make sure you can unmute. Brian or Penny?
You're not muted.
Go ahead.
Correct.
To be humble is to take specific actions in anticipation of your own errors. To confess your fallibility and then do nothing about it is not humble. It is boasting of your modesty. Who are most humble? Those who most skillfully prepare for the deepest and most catastrophic errors in their own beliefs and plans. Because this world contains many whose grasp of rationality is abysmal, beginning students of rationality win arguments and acquire an exaggerated view of their own abilities. But it is useless to be superior. Life is not graded on a curve. The best physicist in ancient Greece could not calculate the path of a falling apple. There's no guarantee that adequacy is possible given your hardest effort. Therefore, spare no thought for whether others are doing worse. If you compare yourself to others, you will not see the biases that all humans share. To be human is to make 10,000 errors. No one in this world achieves perfection.
Beautiful. See, I like many things about this. I like his entire approach to things here. Most people think of humility as a feeling, but what he's saying is that to be humble is to take specific actions in anticipation of your own errors. So all of these virtues have to transform into specific actions, not just saying, okay, I'm humble, not just expressing it in words or emotions, but actually building that into principled actions to correct for them. That's the biggest thing that I got from it. There's lots of people with lots of comments. So let's start with Joe. I think Joe, Maritza, Allison, and Shane Murray. Joe.
So the part I like the best out of this, and I'll keep this brief, is the best physicist in ancient Greece could not calculate the path of a falling apple. And that gives you the idea that it's an iterative process and that you're always going to be wrong. So that just have some humility. It gives you, you look back and understand that these are really smart people that were actually making predictions that came out to be wrong. And it's just primarily because they didn't have enough information. So I think that that's really when it speaks to humility, and this too also speaks very closely to the idea of don't hang on to what you believe to be true. That you really have to, in order to get past your biases, in order to get past the things that are perverting your thinking, that you really have to believe, and this goes back to the first paragraph of embracing your ignorance. And we've had meetups on ignorance and the idea of questions and why questions are more important than answers. We can go into that, but I'd want to be brief. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Next up is Maritza, Allison, and Shane Murray. Maritza.
For this one, it seems like I really like the concept of life is not graded on a curve, and the fact that there's no guarantee, because I think that we try, most of us, to be humble and exercise humility, but where we err is to be humble within our own thoughts and assumptions for our expectations of ourselves. And I like that that's also expressed here in this description.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Maritza. Next up is Allison.
I really like the line where it says, those who most skillfully prepare for the deepest and most catastrophic errors in their own beliefs and plans. And what it makes me think of is how the very best leaders are not the ones who think they know everything. They're the ones who hire the most experienced people who cover their weaknesses, and then they delegate to them.
Mm-hmm.
No, they can't do it, so they make sure they surround themselves with people who can do all the things that they can't do, and they know what they don't know.
Wonderful. Thank you. One of the applications of this in Bayes' theorem is that what happens is that we have always a tendency of looking for facts that support whatever we hold. So this is a way to implement this humility, is to say, if I was wrong, what would I expect to see? So it's like you're twisting that, or you're saying, look, I want to really keep in mind that I can be wrong, and then implement it off by saying, okay, what would I expect to see? Thank you, Shane Murray.
Yes, I'm struggling a little bit with the first sentence and was hoping for clarification, because it says to take specific actions in anticipation of your own errors, which to me suggests kind of a foresight that would prevent errors in the first place. So I wasn't quite, if you could clarify that a little bit, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Sure. So again, I mean, I'm going to keep mentioning Bayesian thinking, because that's actually what this entire approach is based on. Like that's the mathematical foundation of this. So what Bayesian thinking holds is that always try to quantify your level of certainty. So always know how sure are you about it. So have these, what is called kind of priors, and have them explicitly. So if you're saying, okay, if you say, okay, what is the anticipation of my error? So you would come into the situation saying that, you know what, this is how good I understand this. And because I understand it at this level, this is the way in which I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to look for this. So for example, if you think that, okay, I'm not particularly good at judging what a person is feeling, and whenever it is important, then actually ask somebody else that you trust. I am getting this, but what do you think? Because that's kind of acknowledging kind of limits of what you can do, and then taking specific action in anticipation of that error. So that would be an example. All right, let's go to the next one. And next reader, I don't know, I've lost track here. Give me a second. Is going to be Allison. So Allison, scholarship, please.
Study many sciences and absorb their power as your own. Each field that you consume makes you larger. If you swallow enough sciences, the gaps between them will diminish and your knowledge will become a unified whole. If you are gluttonous, you will become vaster than mountains. It is especially important to eat math and science, which impinges upon rationality. Evolutionary psychology, heuristics and biases, social psychology, probability theory, decision theory. But these cannot be the only fields you study. The art must have a purpose other than itself, or it collapses into infinite recursion.
Wonderful. Thank you. So this is very much of, comprehensivism. So any comments on this? Joe?
Oh, I just said, sorry, I was on mute. I was going to basically say the same thing. The ability to see the connections between things. The more that you read, the more that you integrate, and how you integrate that information is really important, so that you have a process for integrating, and then you can kind of see the connections. And then the boundaries between these disciplines then tend to disappear, because you're starting to see that what thought, one idea works in what areas, and you're able to think analogically. Where as opposed to just thinking in a narrow silo. It's my thought.
Wonderful. Thank you. I mean, that is the sentence that also stood out for me. If you swallow enough sciences, the gaps between them will diminish, and your knowledge will become a unified whole. Most people, and what happens is, it's like triangulation. The more elements you add to it, the more everything else comes together. It's like you could have like maybe 10, and you add like 2 or 3 more, and it increases the cohesion of that, because they fill in some of the gaps. So it's wonderful. Next up is Zheng. Zheng, what do you think?
Yeah, it's remind me, this unified whole remind me the design way we were talking about. So yeah, I think each discipline is more like a filter, how we observe the world, like the Tao, the world. So it's like from different angle to see things. So once we have all the different angles, we can understand the things, then we can actually guide the Tao, or the truth behind everything. I think that's the reason we need to study every discipline, and which I found is very lacking with our education system. And the client I met too, who usually educating one part of either the science or art instead of both.
Wonderful. Thank you, Zheng. All right, folks, go ahead and type R to volunteer to read. I'm going to give priority to people who have not read before. So next, we're going to go to the next group. This is going to be on Be Less Wrong. So I like this term, less wrong. Like, see, when you're saying, I want to be right, you're actually pretending to be at the center, but you are actually always at a distance from the center. Even the hero circle, which is there, it's at a distance from the center. And this is kind of, you're saying, go closer. You know that you're not going to reach the center, because being in the center means that you're the cause of everything. You're not going to get there. Like in chapter 11 of Bhagavad Gita, he says, Krishna says, I am Himalaya. So I'm not going to become Himalaya. I'm sorry. But so you have to know your limits. But the idea of less wrong is that you can say that you can always keep correcting. And a lot of progress is all about removing these negatives, removing the things that are holding you back, removing the things that are pointing the wrong way. So that's what this is about. And it rightfully starts with relinquishment. So Jyoti, go ahead. Jyoti, if you could unmute.
P.C. Hoggle said that which can be destroyed, but the truth should be, do not flinch from experiences that might destroy your beliefs. The thought you cannot think controls you more than the thoughts you speak aloud. Submit yourself to ordeals and test yourself in fire. Relinquish the emotion which rests upon a mistaken belief and seeks to feel fully that emotion which fits the facts. If the iron approaches your face and you believe it is hot and it is cool, the way your face and your belief it is not, sorry, I missed it. If the iron approaches your face and you believe it is hot and it is cold, the way opposes your fear. If the iron approaches your face and you believe it is cold and it is hot, the way opposes your calm. Evaluate your beliefs first and then arrive at your emotions. Let yourself say, if the iron is hot, I desire to believe it is hot. And if it is cool, I desire to believe it is cool. Beware lest you become attached to the beliefs you may not want.
Thank you. Thank you, Jyoti. So folks, comments. This is a huge point. This is point about kind of destruction, about giving up of things that are not in accordance with the center, accordance with the truth. And this is actually a prerequisite of any new knowledge. So this is really, all of us have parts in us, and it's very hard. And Jordan Peterson puts it very beautifully. These are like parts of us. This is like, it's like you have to let part of you die. And that's what this relinquishment is about. So it's going to be Evanique, Maritza, and Joe. Evanique.
Yeah, this one really struck me because I think it's about reality. And so when we were studying the Gita, it talks about being in reality about certain things. And so, when you see the truth, if you have a belief and you hold on to it so tightly that if somebody presents you with the truth, you're still like, no, I'm going to believe my belief. I mean, it harms you because now you're presented with facts and you can't comprehend it. Like it's kind of like you're choosing to believe something that's not true. But the question you should ask yourself, and I think this is what he's saying here, is why? Like, why are you clinging to this belief, even though the reality is different from your beliefs? Like what is it in you? Like, what are you afraid of is what he's saying. It's like, really, what are you afraid of? Why are you afraid to let go of that belief? And so I think it just poses, which I love, it poses more questions than answers because it requires that you look at yourself, like a self-reflection. So that's it for me.
Thank you. Thank you, Evanique. Next up is Maritza, Joe, Jyoti, Shane Marie, and Katie. Maritza.
This one brings up mixed feelings to me, Shrikant. The idea of not flinching from experiences that might destroy one's beliefs truly resonates. I struggle a bit more with the idea of just the one line of, where it says, evaluate your beliefs first and then arrive at your emotions. And that seems like fantastic advice, but I feel that as humans, in general, the emotion is already, it's already there. So I struggled a little bit with that. And what I came up with thinking of this one, and this is from reading it, earlier, my thought was, if I look at it from the perspective of, how we've mentioned in other discussions that, like we think, emotions lead and thought follows. Maybe what I'm hearing here is that that's not necessarily true. And how do I make my peace with this? I was thinking that it's a matter of just because an emotion is felt doesn't mean that we must allow the action to be completed solely based on the feeling of that emotion. So I just want to share I had that whole thinking process with this one because it was a little bit hard to get it.
Thank you. Thank you, Maritza. So I'd say a couple of things. Evaluate your beliefs first and then arrive at your emotions. This is actually not very precise because emotions just are. But what he's saying, but there is a point that he's making, which I think is true. What he's saying is that when you evaluate your beliefs, that means you say, what he's saying is that be focused on the center, be focused on the truth. And if you find that your beliefs are not true, be prepared to give them up. And if there are emotions that are rooted in that, then do not act on them. Realize that they are kind of conflicting with reality and work to change them over time. I don't think it happens automatically, but what he's saying is that don't act on them. So it's like, like he says, maintain this kind of love of the center, so that if there are parts of you, whether emotions or actions or habits or thoughts or intuitions, always keep coming to the center and saying, is this true? Is this towards the center? And if it is not, be prepared to relinquish it. I think relinquish is there. So it's like, it's not just you arrive at, I don't think arrive at emotions. You say, then be prepared to relinquish those emotions in time. And what happens if you do it, it's the basic idea of the like cognitive behavioral therapy, is that if you put all your effort to make sure that you're correct, and then you act on it, and what happens is that action over time changes the emotions. It doesn't change automatically. The emotions doesn't go away immediately, but over time, the emotions change. I think that's where he's coming from. Next up is going to be Joe, followed by Jyoti. Joe.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth with the idea of CBT being the point here. I think we have to actually just take a step back and actually think about what the writer's writing about it from a rationalist perspective, right? So the rationalist perspective is that you take the information in, and then you're actually looking at it and deciding whether it's objectively true. And what is true out of that, and what you're stopping is you're stopping to believe, you're checking your deepest beliefs and seeing how that allows you to act in the world. And that can impact you in a number of ways. And that's where the CBT aspect of things comes in. I also see in this particular passage, this idea of not wishing the things to be different than they actually are. So that you're actually surrendering yourself to the information that's coming in, and basically, that if you're given new information, don't allow your biases, don't allow your emotions to dictate what you're seeing in other things or in the information that you're trying to evaluate. So that's just a couple of things. And the other aspect of it is not to look at evidence as a constraint. And I think that's an important part of this as well, that you look at evidence and you start to see it and you're open to it and you're able to integrate it, as opposed to automatically just rejecting it.
Yeah, and I like the first opening quote here. That which can be destroyed by truth should be. So that's the standard that he's holding up. Next up is Jyoti, followed by Shane Murray. Jyoti.
Yeah, the way I understand this rationality is, don't bring preconceived ideas and belief systems in the present. Stay with the present situation and evaluate it in your mind, whether it is pertaining to what you are getting, what you are seeing, what you are getting. And I like this paragraph: submit yourself to ordeals and test yourself in fire. Because at that time, if you are neutral, then you will know what the incoming information is, whether it is correct or incorrect. That's the only way you will know, because your mind would be neutral, and you are not set up with some kind of an emotion, already preconceived emotion, that is interfering with your acquisition of the present situation.
Thank you, Jyoti. This reminds me of Aquinas and his cogitative sense, and he's talking about the cogitative sense, which is trying to put everything together, which is driving kind of this evaluations, and which are driving action. So there is this loop that is going on between these three, and what he's saying is that relinquish the emotion which rests upon mistaken belief. And seek to feel fully that emotion which fits the fact. So it's like working, thinking, emotion, and action in parallel. Next up is Shane Marie, Katie, and Brian or Penny. Shane Marie.
Yes, I was just thinking of the challenge of relinquishment, and I think it runs deeper than exchanging an old notion for the truth. I think we have a sense that what this ultimately asking is that we orient ourselves towards a deep and constant unknowing, that truth may not occur or contain absolutes. And so I think it's when you recognize this process, you also recognize that you're always kind of engaging with the unknown, and that what you think is a truth today will probably need to be burned off by the fire in the future. And so it's hard to have a sense of engaging in this process and trusting that you'll find grounding somewhere in it, even though I know that you do, but it's a different kind of grounding than what we comprehend now. So
yeah, no, excellent point. And it's definitely, this is extremely hard, because it's like you have to let things die. That is it. Next up is Katie, followed by Brian. Katie.
I think there's two scenarios too that this because your beliefs should reflect reality. And I think for me, there's two scenarios. One, if someone is presenting their beliefs, and then you realize, wow, that person has a better idea than I do. Maybe I should, think of it the way they do. And there's another scenario where someone's trying, telling you you're wrong and trying to correct your beliefs, which can be a painful experience for people a little bit if you feel like someone's trying to, teach you into a more correct belief. So I find the first one to be really easy. Like if I'm sitting there and I'm listening to someone's beliefs and I'm like, oh, well, they have a better grasp of it, I'll just take that on myself. And it's a little bit harder if I feel like it's a little bit painful if someone's trying to tell you, you're wrong, that you should be. It's a little bit easier to integrate information if they're just presenting it, and then it's easier to see it.
Wonderful. So on that second point, there is going to be a virtue called argument, and we'll come to that. Next up is going to be Brian, followed by Maritza. Brian.
So I think it's great that you put first the nameless virtue, of having a purpose, pursuing a purpose, even, formulating and pursuing a purpose. Because I think that's the context in which relinquishment makes sense and has value. If you look here, the one quote, the one sentence that really threw me off was, submit yourself to ordeals and test yourself by fire. I don't think you should do that gratuitously. I think you should, submit yourself to ordeals and test yourself by fire as required to fulfill or pursue your purpose, not just aimlessly. So I would change that first quote a little bit. That which can be destroyed by the relevant truth should be destroyed. You don't need to explore all of truth, but just the truths that are important on your path.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. And that point about the context of the center is crucial. Like the one virtue, that this actually prepares the ground for new growth. When I was talking to my dad about this, he says, oh, that's just, the old leaf has to fall so that there is space for new leaf. The old leaf falls because that's how you get the nutrients for the new growth that is taking place. And there is that cycle that is there. Next up is going to be Maritza.
Looking at this from, Joe pointed out when he reminded us that this is the 12 virtues of, rationality. And so, from a rational perspective, we're looking at emotions. Emotions are, they vary depending on our philosophical beliefs and value system. So to relinquish something like that, it's a matter of, we have a dichotomy between, there's going to be conflict between the actual emotion even, but that would be because there's dissonance between a value system. So if I look at it from that perspective, then what we're being told here with this virtue in relinquishment is that, if there is dissonance, recheck your values, because there's something, there must be a conflict with something that you hold as a value, because our emotional attitudes are more directly caused by subconscious values more so than conscious. So I would imagine that we're being admonished here is that if we give too much rigidity to a conscious value, in that case, then we're going to find a dissonance. And it's probably because, you have to, whenever there's a conflict, check your premises. That holds true here. If we're looking from a rational perspective, we have to go back and reconsider an internal value. And that's what I'm hearing here.
Absolutely. Check your premises is what he's saying. All right, let's go to the next one. It's going to be Joe, and the next reader after that is going to be Brian. If you'd like to volunteer to read, go ahead and type a R. Go ahead, Joe.
Lightness. Let the winds of evidence blow you about as though you are a leaf, with no direction of your own. Beware lest you fight a rear guard retreat against the evidence, grudgingly conceding each foot of ground only when forced, feeling cheated. Surrender to the truth as quickly as you can. Do this instant you realize what you are resisting. The instant you can see from which quarter the winds of evidence are blowing against you. Be faithless to your cause and betray it to a stronger enemy. If you regard evidence as a constraint and seek to free yourself, you sell yourself into chains of your whims. For you cannot make a true map of a city by sitting in your bedroom with your eyes shut and drawing lines upon paper according to impulse. You must walk through the city and draw lines on paper that correspond to what you see. If seeing the city unclearly, you think that you can shift a line just a little to the right, just a little to the left, according to your caprice, this is just the same mistake.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. If anybody wants to comment on it, go ahead and type exclamation mark. There are a couple of phrases that I like over here. Surrender to truth as quickly as you can. So this is, again, a version of relinquishment. And I like the term lightness in this context, because what happens is that people are kind of holding on to their beliefs. This is my favorite quotation by Sapolsky. It's like strong opinions weakly held. So you have strong opinions, you're acting on them fully, but they are weakly held in the sense that you are always open. You're always looking for anything that is contrary, and you're willing to change it. Next up is Evanique.
Shrikant, I was going to say that quote, that very quote. So thank you. But I mean, and I like this because, well, the title, lightness, right? It just makes you feel lighter. But the first sentence, let the winds of evidence blow you about as though you are a leaf with no direction of your own. I think that's key to relinquishment, is that, you can have a belief, that's strongly held, but you have to be able to be flexible enough, like water, in a sense, to let a new idea come in and evaluate it. And if you find that it's true, go in that direction. So it's like you could have goals and you can have dreams and everything for your life. But when new things come in, when a new reality comes in, when you're presented with new ideas and new facts in particular, it, like this line says, surrender to the truth as quickly as you can. You have to be able to burn off those old beliefs, those old dreams when you realize, it's not grounded in truth. It's not grounded in fact. And then, in a sense, not that you're allowing life to take you. I'm trying to figure out how to say this, but I think you relinquish control. And once you relinquish control, you can relinquish the anxiety that comes with that, with trying to control everything and everyone around you. You can only control what you do. You can't control anything else. You can't control the circumstances of life. Some people want to deny that certain things are happening, and they're happening, and the denial doesn't help. It just makes things worse. So when you're light like this, you can just roll with the punches and be like, okay, let's deal with it. So I really like this one. So many other things, but I'm going to let other people speak.
Thank you, Evanik. I also like this. This is a question of just kind of breathing in, of kind of taking things in. It's about openness. Like when in Gita we say Om, then the next thing you're doing is that you're actually listening to the Om, so that you are actually saying that I am actually present here, and I am being aware of what is. And I'm trying to do that as directly as possible without the interference of whatever it is that I had taught in the past. You're being present, you're being open to life, you're letting life break in on you. That's what this is about. Next up is Shane Murray.
Yes, so I really like the line. It says, you must walk through the city and draw lines on paper that correspond to what you see. And what that came to mind for me is that you must make manifest your understanding to really get a hold of it. So it's like the means by which you solidify an idea. Otherwise, it just kind of spins out there in the ether, but it's like it, really get in there and make it manifest. And that's how you really solidify it, I think.
Excellent. The point that I also like that line quite a bit. And the point I get from it is that throughout this entire virtues, he's going from like emotion, reason, and action. And he's putting them, he's saying that they have to be one. They have to be flowing from one to the other. You can't be sitting and expect to have actually good reason. You have to be walking. And then you can't just be walking, you have to be drawing your understanding of the walking, which corresponds to it. And if you have some emotion which is contrary to that, you have to get rid of that, because that's not what the city is. What you wish some things were where they are not, but they are not there. So you have to adjust your map according to the territory, and then adjust your emotions to that as well. All right, let's go to the next one. Our next reader is going to be Brian, and we are going to be looking at, let me see, just a second. I want to make sure. Yeah, sorry about that. Evenness.
You want to read it?
No.
Okay. Evenness. One who wishes to believe says, does the evidence permit me to believe? One who wishes to disbelieve asks, does the evidence force me to believe? Beware lest you place huge burdens of proof only on propositions you dislike, and then defend yourself by saying, but it is good to be skeptical. If you attend only to favorable evidence, picking and choosing from your gathered data, then the more data you gather, the less you know. If you are selective about which arguments you inspect for flaws, or how hard you inspect for flaws, then every flaw you learn how to detect makes you that much stupider. If you first write at the bottom of a sheet of paper, and therefore the sky is green, it does not matter what arguments you write above if afterward the conclusion is already written and it is already correct or already wrong. To be clever in argument is not rationality, but rationalization. Intelligence, to be useful, must be used for something other than defeating itself. Listen to hypotheses as they plead their cases before you. But remember that you are not a hypothesis, you are the judge. Therefore, do not seek to argue for one side or another. For if you knew your destination, you would already be there.
I very much like this one, and this is very much what people do, because it's a way of kind of rationalization. Like, I like the first contrast. It says, one who wishes to believe says, does the evidence permit me to believe? The one who wishes to disbelieve asks, does the evidence force me to believe? What is common to both of them is that they already have decided what it is. And then they are looking to the evidence to just support them. And that is like fundamental recipe for making sure that you don't get that. All right, next up is going to be Joe. Joe, go ahead.
I like this for a number of reasons. Is that, you know, don't put the blame on something, like don't place the burden of knowing something on just on something that you don't like, so that you're kind of just open to the idea. But the line I liked, let me see, was in there. It was to be clever in an argument rationality versus rationalization. And I always think of like kind of the sophists in this particular instance, where the goal was actually to win the argument, actually, versus the debating the topic itself. And so there, and you can do that. We all have been in that, where we want to basically make our point. But abandoning that is the virtuous thing to do. It's not necessarily, you have to, and this goes back to the importance of being humble in your approach when you're making points, is you have to be humble, because you have to be able to let go and not rationalize your perception of reality. There are people that are much more articulate in certain circumstances that may be wrong, but they'll prove their point anyway. And so I think that's the first thing that had come to my mind when I actually saw this idea of evenness, is, yeah, the sophists, the way they used to be.
Thank you. Next up is Shane Murray.
Yes, I was thinking on where it says the conclusion is already written. And I was thinking of this in terms of foreclosing prematurely on truth. We not just foreclose prematurely on truth, but the beauty that truth often encompasses. So oftentimes truth in the more absolute sense, if that is a thing, holds a level of beauty that we foreclose on. So it's not just knowing facts, it's foreclosing on beauty as well, I think.
Excellent point. I mean, in today's world, people choose to listen to only certain people on things. So that it's like with social media and stuff like that, you basically just say, oh, everybody is saying this. And that everybody is the people that you've chosen who are going to just support what you're going to say. Next up is Allison.
Yeah, I was thinking about like what Joe said, and then also the last line where it says, therefore, do not seek to argue for one side or another, for if you knew your destination, you would already be there. There are some people, they always win their arguments because they never stop. They're like a pit bull. They love to argue, and they're going to just keep going and going and going until the other person just is like, okay, you're right, just because they just don't feel like arguing. And they just walk away. And then the other one thinks that they won their point, but they didn't win. They just won because they're just so tenacious. But that's not, it doesn't mean that they actually arrived at truth. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Allison. Next up is Brian.
So I like what Allison just said. I don't know, it ties in with a lot of the more recent virtues that have been read about, but the evenness point I thought was, what struck me is that sometimes, life comes at you, breaks in on you, like Sullivan has said. And you cannot remain neutral as to what color the sky is. You're going to have to decide, at least for present purposes. And, so it kind of puts that skepticism. I don't know, I guess the solution to skepticism, as you say, for present purposes, the sky is whatever. The sky is blue or hazy or whatever. But my only point is that, yeah, sometimes you do have to decide what color the sky is, and you've got to take a position. And skepticism does not help you do that. That sort of life impinging upon you puts an end to the skepticism. I'm not quite sure how that fits in with the evenness, but it does require you to take a position sometimes.
Sure. He's certainly not saying that. What he's saying, he's talked about skepticism as a cop-out. He's saying that, being dogmatic about believing in something or disbelieving in something is not good. He's saying by being, kind of wearing a skeptic's hat only for things you disbelieve is not good. He certainly is a very strong proponent of arriving at conclusions. He's saying, what is the sky? Try to figure out what it is. And he's definitely for coming up with answers to questions all the time as best as you possibly can. And so it's definitely not a skeptic. So that's, and we will come to it when we come to the piece on the standards. He's going to, deal with it in a great amount of detail. Here, he's simply saying that do not put undue burden of evidence on things which you disagree with, so that you have a standard. Rationality requires that you are open to life, just like you cannot shut your eyes to anything that you don't want to see, you don't want to exist. You can't do the same thing at a reasoning level, where you put different levels of different standards of evidence for things that you do not want to admit. All right, let's go to the next one. It's going to be Evanique reading Argument.
Argument. Those who wish to fail must first prevent their friends from helping them. Those who smile wisely and say, I will not argue, remove themselves from help and withdraw from the communal effort. In argument, strive for exact honesty for the sake of others and also yourself. The part of yourself that distorts what you say to others also distorts your own thoughts. Do not believe you do others a favor if you accept their arguments. The favor is to you. Do not think that fairness to all sides means balancing yourself evenly between positions. Truth is not handed out in equal portions before the start of a debate. You cannot move forward on factual questions by fighting with fists or insults. Seek a test that lets reality judge between you.
Thank you, Evanique. If you'd like to comment, go ahead and type an exclamation mark. I think this is a huge point. This is the point about the value of social interaction, that we are social beings, and you have that feedback mechanism accessible to you. If you shut your eyes to that, and close your ears, you're losing something crucial. And for me, my friends have been really, really helpful in correcting your errors, and they will save you years of your life by doing that. So next up is going to be Joe, Maritza, Cheng, and Evanique. Joe.
Yeah, I like this idea. Do not think that fairness is balancing evenly between positions, and truth is not handed in equal portions. That's an important point, because that gets exactly back to what we were just talking about. You don't want to rationalize the answer. You want a rational way of approaching that. And sometimes when we're having these debates, they're not necessarily going to be balanced. So you don't necessarily think I'm going to kind of adjust my opinion to make everybody happy, or things like that. It's that you have to be objective. And when you're objective, it may be more one-sided than the other. So, that was that, that's the other part is I will not argue to remove myself from help and withdrawal from communal effort. Basically, an argument to strive for exact honesty. That was actually the other line that had spoken to me, mostly because well, I don't have to go into the particulars to that. It's important.
Thank you, Joe. Next up is Maritza, Cheng, and Evanique. Maritza.
So this virtue here really struck a chord with me, because I find that in today's common social culture, it has become quite out of fashion to say that you enjoy a good argument. It's almost taboo. And if for anyone unfortunate enough to ever look at dating sites, you'll see that as well. People they'll say they'll go through any lengths to avoid conflict. And this brings that up to mind for me as how unnatural that is to one's true self. The idea of, I love the phrase here that someone who's just saying, I'm not even going to bother, is withdrawing from the communal effort. And I love that, because I have said to people before, in refusing to deal with me true and let me know when there's a conflict or interact with me, what you're doing is you're depriving me of the ability to get to know you. And if you extrapolate that, if we never put forth the effort to engage in an argument, it means we're never putting forth our true selves into the universe, into the social arena. And that seems like an absolutely horrifying way to live.
Wonderful. Thank you, Maritza. That's a great point. Next up is Cheng, followed by Evanique. Cheng.
Yeah, so I agree with Melissa. I think not just here, even in China. When I was in college, I love to argue with other people and they think I'm not agreeable. I'm not very popular, I think, especially expect girls to be more agreeable somehow. And the most popular girl is very agreeable. And I found even in American too, it's funny, they have this, they said in the PTSA meeting, then the American school, like people are so harmony, nobody have any disagreement, but then they have a French school, everybody like pounding tables, have all this. And I just found I'm not sure what's the reason, but I found American culture is very hypocrite in many ways. So they actually, even for racists, if nobody express anything, you don't know how he feel, and you don't even have a chance to correct the idea behind it, because people learn to be so polite and not and pretend to be nice, but distance, you know what I mean? So then they don't really have a way to correct their thought behind it, because they learn how to handle this in this way. It's not honesty, So I think argue with different opinions should be welcomed in the culture, instead of like, oh, you can't say this. This is politically incorrect. You can't say that. But you don't say it doesn't mean you don't think that way. But because you say it, then we have a debate. Maybe I help you to improve, expand your view, because the reason you think that way, because your limited experience, your limited view. But if you don't have that experience, just repressed to express your opinion instead of like changing your opinion, it's very unhealthy. I think that's what it's just like the medical system. You treat the symptom, not the cause. The core reason behind it is because how you think. It's not how you behave, but they correct out the behavior without actually transform the thinking behind it. I think that's what's wrong with this society right now. And that's maybe if people are so repressed, then they shoot guns to everybody, anyway.
Wonderful, great points. Thank you, Jeng. That was wonderful. Next up is Evanique, Allison, and Shane Murray. Evanique.
Yeah, this one spoke to me because I used to be a high school speech and debate coach. So I taught teenagers how to debate and argue. But I think the one line that really got to me is, what is it? An argument, strive for exact honesty. And I think that's the key. When people withdraw from an argument, it's generally because they don't want to be honest, because they're afraid to have their beliefs tested. They don't want to put it out there, because when you argue and when you debate and when you have like a respectful debate, you are putting your idea out there on the table to be criticized and to be argued against. But how else will you know if what your belief is true? Now, Jane put it beautifully when she said, Americans, we're afraid to argue with each other. And it's true, because we demonize each other for having an idea that is opposed to another person or is opposed to someone's belief, which leads up to what we've been talking about this whole entire time. It's like, all these other virtues are kind of leading up to this one, and I'm sure this one will lead up to others. But, in order to have your beliefs tested, you have to put them out there. And I think the key is that when you are arguing with someone, and I'll use the word arguing because that's what you're doing. When you're arguing with someone, you still have to respect that person, even if you don't agree with their beliefs or you find their beliefs to not be factual. And I think that's what lacks in America today. Attacking someone's belief or attacking someone's idea, it shouldn't be arguing against one's belief or arguing against one's idea is equivalent to an attack on them. And that's why people get so defensive. But if you look at it this way, especially this line here, do not believe you do others a favor if you accept their arguments. The favor is to you. Because sometimes when you debate, you may realize that maybe my argument was wrong, and maybe this argument is better. Maybe I need to look at that. Or if you don't believe that, you need to be honest and say, I don't believe it, and here's the reasons why. I think that's the only way true growth happens, and that's where new ideas come from, is this idea of debate. If you look, in past history, there were always debates on the square, in different areas, in different public forums. There was always debate and argument about ideas. We've lost that. And so I think we've lost the power of argument now, where we'll either walk away or just agree, or just agree with the other person just to shut them up. And I don't think that's how you get ideas out there.
Wonderful. Thank you, Evanique. Great points. Next up is Allison, followed by Shane Murray. Allison.
Well, I'm the person that walks away or says you're right and just to shut them up. I do it all the time because I don't feel like arguing. I think there's enough stress in life. I don't need it in my life. I don't want it. But I think there's a huge difference between an argument and a discussion. I am very happy to discuss things with people who have completely different viewpoints. I have friends who have polar opposite views, and we will talk about things in a very calm way. But if I know that it's their temperament to want to argue, I just shut down, because I just feel like, who needs the drama? It's just like, who needs it? But I feel like a respectful discussion where people are, they're not raising their voices, they're calmly talking about the issues, then you can actually get somewhere. But when the second someone starts like raising their voice and arguing and yelling, and it's like, it's just, really unpleasant. And I don't know, I'm like too old for it. I don't care anymore. I don't feel like dealing with it. Like, go to a boxing thing. I don't know. Don't involve me.
Thank you. Thank you, Allison. Next up is going to be Shane Murray.
Yeah, so I'm thinking what this is suggesting, that people need to be courageous enough to stand in the arena and suffer their own ignorance, and also to counter another person's ignorance. And that's not often easy. But the other thing I was thinking that seems to be an issue with us now in terms of having honest conversation is that there's a deep judgment of ignorance. Like we presume it's a character flaw, as opposed to something somebody can step away from, can grow from, can learn from. And so I think people are unwilling to expose some of their ignorance, because in this day and time, people won't let them move from that ever. You know what I mean? They will say that's who they are, as opposed to recognizing there's more knowledge and understanding that they need. You know what I mean? And kind of demonize them because of their ignorance, instead of just understanding they just don't know better and could possibly know better with more information.
Wonderful. Thank you, Shane Murray. I want to emphasize one point. The first sentence itself, those who wish to fail must first prevent their friends from helping them. So he's making a very subtle point here. Okay, he's really saying, it's not about arguments with these people who really love arguments or anything like that. This actually applies to close friends, people who actually want the best for you, and you want the best for them. And even in those situations, people kind of do this, smile wisely and say, I will not argue, remove themselves from help, withdraw from the communal effort. What happens is that, especially in close relationships and friendships, they have the ability of giving you the crucial feedback. They have the willingness to do that. And if you do not engage that, if you do not accept that, if you're not open to that, then you're losing something. So I like the exact phrasing. They must first prevent, in order to fail, you have to first prevent your friends from helping you, because you will find, at least I have found, that many friends will be trying to help you, in their own ways, sometimes gentle, sometimes harsh, but kind of listening to that and being open to that feedback. All right, next reader is going to be Maritza, and it's going to be, I want to make sure not too many clicks. Give me a second, just a second. Next one, we are going to the final three. This is going to be hold yourself to high standards. That's how I classified them. The first one is on precision.
One comes and says, the quantity is between 1 and 100. Another says, the quantity is between 40 and 50. If the quantity is 42, they are both correct, but the second prediction was more useful and exposed itself to a stricter test. What is true of one apple may not be true of another apple. Thus, more can be said about a single apple than about all the apples in the world. The narrowest statements slice deepest, the cutting edge of the blade. As with the map, so too with the art of map making. The way is a precise art. Do not walk to the truth, but dance. On each and every step of that dance, your foot comes down in exactly the right spot. Each piece of evidence shifts your beliefs by exactly the right amount, neither more nor less. What is exactly the right amount? To calculate this, you must study probability theory. Even if you cannot do the math, knowing that the math exists tells you that the dance step is precise and has no room in it for your whims.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Maritza. Anybody has any comments on precision? Maritza.
I really like the idea here of being told to calculate precision, and the imagery that dance brings. It's kind of funny because it's the like imprecise preciseness of it all that I really like. Like, one can calculate exactly where to go, but then it's also a true statement. When I used to teach people how to dance, I would say, you say different things because different positions for the men and the women. And to a female, I would say, spins are hard. You might get twisted up, you might, fall out. But when at the end, regardless of what happens, when you're coming out of a spin, kick your leg back. No matter what you did, if you tripped, if you stumbled, if you totally got lost while being spun, make sure that when he stops spinning you, kick your leg back. Doesn't matter what you're doing. If you do that, you can reset and you're good. And you'll make it pretty. Doesn't matter how ugly it was. I hear that here in what they're saying is that if you calculate it, you don't have to know the exact number of seconds that you're going to be in the spin. You don't have to know the spin even. If you know that the last step must be this one, everything else is more forgiven, or it'll fall more into place. And I see that here in what he's saying, because I don't think he's telling us that we need absolute rigidity. It's the concept of the beforehand rumination about what is to come. And if we do that, it allows us more precision when we reach the end.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Maritza. I like the dance analogy here. Next up is Joe, followed by Cheng. Joe.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I like about this is just have a way to integrate information, even if you don't know the statistics and the details of what is going on. Have some principles that actually you can use in order to take in new information and be as precise as possible. And so I think that's having your set of principles. And I'm sure there's another aspect of this, the earlier paragraph that I'd seen earlier. That speaks to this as well. But anyway, just that's my only thought about that.
Thank you, Joe. Next up is Jen.
Yeah, I think this reminds me, to be precise. Precision actually required mastery. Like before we actually reach that stage, it takes a lot of effort and experience to reach that stage. I want to give example of cooking. I'm actually, because of my kids' allergy, I cook a lot, and I'm learning cooking, quite fascinating. And I found, like every time I go to the grocery store, I tend to buy too many things. Like, oh, there's this. So I come with the whole fridge is 2 fridges filled. But then I realized, I get more experience, my fridge get more emptier, because I think like we said, you have the end in the mind. When they experience the cook when they shop, they know what they will cook and what these things are going to become and the amount of it. It takes a lot of experience actually to be precise, same as architecture design. The minimalism actually take way more effort than the lots of things going on in the building. It's actually you be able to reduce those. So I think this is actually show the mastery.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jen. And we're going to relate. The next point is going to be on precision. So there's some of these points are going to come back. Brian.
This one, I would like the sentence here: the narrowest statements slice deepest, the cutting edge of the blade. Because what this is saying to me is, that you shouldn't generalize. You shouldn't draw really big conclusions. You should not look at things kind of in big terms. You should, try to say, oh, look, what we have here is 5 people in the room. And, so I'm just looking at those 5 people and basing it on that, not like, oh, everybody in New York believes this, that if you try to limit yourself, then you're probably going to be more truthful and accurate than if you generalize.
Thank you, Penny. The thing I read, I have a book on American founding folks, and it's called The Calculating People. Like, if you look at their thinking, it's all about, I reckon, I calculate, and they use the term calculate. What they're saying is that I'm going to use my mind as best as I can in order to come up with limits as best as I possibly can for everything I'm looking at. And that's kind of built into their habit of thinking. So that precision comes, it's not necessarily quantification, but it is using your mind in order to grab reality with as much precision as you possibly can. So next up is going to be Joe. We got 2 more to go. So if anybody else wants to read, they're welcome. Joe, simplicity. Give me a second. Can't just do this on my iPad. Go ahead.
Anton de Saint-Exupéry. Okay, I definitely, I don't know if I got that right. Said, perfection is achieved not when there is nothing left to add, but when there is nothing left to take away. Simplicity is virtuous in belief, design, planning, and justification. When you profess huge belief with many details, each additional detail is another chance for belief to be wrong. Each specification adds to your burden. If you can lighten your burden, you must do so. There is no straw that lacks the power to break your back. Of artifacts, it is said, the most reliable gear is the one that is designed out of the machine. Of plans, a tangled web breaks. A chain of a thousand links will arrive at a correct conclusion if every step is correct. But if one step is wrong, it may carry you anywhere. In mathematics, a mountain of good deeds cannot atone for a single sin. Therefore, be careful with every step.
All right, folks, if you would like to comment on simplicity, go ahead and type an exclamation mark. Evanique.
Of this first line, perfection is achieved not when there is nothing left to add, but when there's nothing left to take away. I love that because I think it just defines it in a way that I've never thought of before. And when there's nothing left to take away, then you're at simplicity, right? As a lot of times we add things that don't need to be added, or we're always talking about adding ideas, and even tonight we're like, look at this idea, look at this idea, but there's also some undercurrent to that of taking away ideas. And that's what the argument part too, is that when people have arguments and they realize that their ideas may be wrong, you take that away. And so when you get to the point where maybe you're discussing and you're in this communal discussion and you say, okay, there's nothing left to take away, we're here, that's simplicity, and that's huge.
Wonderful. Thank you, Evanique. Next up is Joe, followed by Jen. Joe.
Just really quickly, the definition of genius is this idea of taking something complex and making it simple, is what Albert Einstein used to say. But I think that the most important part about this is, when I think of this particular passage, I thought of principles, because you have to be able to state principles very, very simply, because they have to be comprehensive. So I think of cardinal virtues. in this particular instance. You have cardinal virtues because they actually provide you with an aim and a goal of where you can actually, how you act in the world. So in other words, if I like the example of you can't be charitable without being just, or something along those lines, so that if you think you're being charitable in one particular instance, that it wouldn't necessarily work if it wasn't attained in a just manner. So the idea that the more complex that you have your virtues, that your goals, then there is more room, there's actually a greater chance of error. Then things become more complex and you have to think about them even more when you're actually working through a certain circumstance. So I think I thought of the cardinal virtues specifically when I read this, but it's any principles in general, that when you're having your principle level, that you have to be able to state it as simply as possible.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Next up is Jen, followed by DLJ. Jen.
Yeah, I think this also tie back to the minimalism in architectural design. I think the simplicity means you cut off all the things that's not necessary. So you have to know what is important. You have to leave only the essential things there, which actually requires a lot. Just like minimalism life, people try to do, and they can live a life without all the things, because I think the reason we are easily clustered in the house, like my house right now, I think the reason is like, we don't really know what is essential. Basically, we think everything could be there, we could use it later. So when you still down to the most essential part of your life, then you can reach that simplicity. And also I remember I read somewhere they mentioned about the difference between the simple and minimalism. It's like one is you have to reach this richness, then you reduce the essential. So even though it's simple, but it's rich, but versus the other one, the international building style is just simple, it's boring. So the rich, simple, because they have all the essential things still there, but they reduce the minimal. So you can focus on those most important things versus just simple. I think it's very different level of design.
That's a great point. Dao De Jing does a very good job of describing this issue. Like, Dao is very simple, and it actually produces all this complexity. So it is, that idea of having that seed germ and identifying the right seed germ, which is as simple as possible, but has the potential of getting you everything. Next up is DLJ.
Hi, evening all. Long time no see. Yeah, there's a framework, best practice framework from about 30 years or so ago, which contained the immortal line, which was good decisions are based on processes and facts, not hearsay and rumor. And there's been a lot in here so far about facts. This is the first mention, I think, of process. So it's good to see it in there. Chain of 1,000 links will arrive at a correct conclusion if every step is correct. That is very much talking about process. And then, of course, evaluation whether the process is correct is a whole different governance question. But yeah, good to see process in there.
Thank you, DLJ. Next up, we're going to the last, perfectionism. Who would like to read it? Go ahead and type out R. Evanik?
Perfectionism. The more errors you correct in yourself, the more you notice. As your mind becomes more silent, you hear more noise. When you notice an error in yourself, this signals your readiness to seek advancement to the next level. If you tolerate the error rather than correcting it, you will not advance to the next level, and you will not gain the skill to notice new errors. In every art, if you do not seek perfection, you will halt before taking your first steps. If perfection is impossible, that is no excuse for not trying. Hold yourself to the highest standard you can imagine and look for one still higher. Do not be content with the answer that is almost right. Seek one that is exactly right.
Wonderful. Would anybody like to comment on this? We'll start with Evanique, Shane Murray, Maritza, and Chuck. Evanique.
This one, I like this one because I think it requires you to always go to that next level. But at the same time, as you're going to that next level, you're going to notice more about yourself. And it's about that diagram, right? It's burning off the things that no longer serve you. When you're going to that next level, maybe this quality that you had, or this idea, or this value, or this virtue that you held may not be the virtue that you need to take you to the next level. So at one point you may need to be easy on yourself because maybe you've come out of traumatic experience, or, maybe you've just gotten through a hard time, right? So you're a little easy on yourself. But then at some point you got to say to yourself, you know what, it's time to move on to another level. And you'll know when that is because you'll become discontent. And then you'll kind of get rid of certain things that were helpful to you, but now are harmful. So that's what I like about this. But the part that really got to me is as your mind becomes more silent, you hear more noise. And it's so true. When you notice an error in yourself, this signals your readiness to seek advancement to the next level. And that's what I'm talking about when you're not content with where you are anymore. Maybe that's where you needed to be at for a period of time. But when you notice it, notice ways that you can move forward and ways that you can up yourself a level. And it's uncomfortable, but it provides growth.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Evanique. Next up is Shane Murray, followed by Maritza. Shane Murray.
Yeah, I was just thinking this speaks to the accountability that's necessary by each of us to move our life along. But then I found that into stark contrast with kind of like the Christian notion of that no man is without sin, and to be human is to err, and those kinds of things. So we have like I think this sounds like a good path. Hold yourself to the highest standard. And I think Jordan Peterson expresses that. And I think many people know that that's the path to change and transformation. But yet we have these cultural notions that keep us lesser than what we can be.
Thank you, Shane Murray. I mean, there are multiple interpretations of that. I mean, I do think that many people think of it this way. The other way is to, other way is religious, from my reading of Gospel of John, it's mostly about saying, it's this very similar thing of saying, give up things which are not going directly towards the center. That's how I read it. But I know that there are many people think about it differently. Next up is Maritza, Joe, and Cheng. Maritza.
I like that what is included in here is that, just because something is impossible doesn't mean one should not strive for it. I think that oftentimes it just, again, if we look at the societal culture, encourages us to only strive for that which is attainable. So I really like the admonition here to just go one step higher.
Wonderful. I particularly like the start of it. The more errors you correct in yourself, the more you notice. As your mind becomes silent, you hear more noise. That is profoundly true. It's like, it's kind of levels of cleaning up. You do not even notice a whole bunch of things because your mind is full of those things. As you clear out some junk, you have a new conception of what is possible and what you start to notice. So that's a great point. Next up is Joe, followed by Cheng. Joe.
Yeah, I think, kind of it looks at, learning is a iterative process, but the line I liked is if you tolerate error rather than correcting it, you will not advance to the next level. I mean, this idea that if you're willing, if you're becoming complacent, and you're starting to drift, this gets back to the whole idea of drifting, then you're not going to not only get to the next era, I wouldn't even say get to the next level, I would actually say even probably regress in certain ways. So that's that's one of the key points that I take away. I think that Marissa made a very good point when it comes to this idea of striving towards the ideal. That it's sometimes that you don't necessarily, that we tend to look at our limitations and set a ceiling, as opposed to actually trying to achieve as best we possibly can under given certain circumstances. Once we make, if we achieve something, we feel good about it, which we should, but it may not have been everything that you could have possibly have done to be, to push yourself beyond those limits.
Wonderful. I mean, I think of it in terms of kind of loving the center. So you're going towards the center. That's your goal. And like, because the moment you set that, like that's the highest possible, basically you're saying, go for the highest possible idea. And that's the context in which everything else, comes together. Next up is Jen.
Yeah, actually, I think there's a balance between the perfectionist and the content, because I found, just like this first sentence said, I found a lot of time the most successful people are usually most criticize of themselves. So they're usually very depressed, not happy. So, and the happiest person usually have nothing accomplished. They're just happy. So I think there's a middle, like the Tao Te Ching, there's a middle line between this. I have this idea about the long-term perfectionist. So it's like, instead of like you try to achieve perfectionist in a drive, I think I mentioned before, like when we do the design, with the knowledge I have right now, if I work 24 hours, do my best, 20/80, rule, I still get to there because that's what I can do at this point. So I think, but I keep improving, just like I actually meet with an architect, award-winning architect, and actually that's his idea about perfectionist too. And I said, I'm doing the opposite. I'm not working for very high-end house, but I'm just like acting. There's different way to reach Rome. So I study different actors. Like some people, like Daniel Day-Lewis, my favorite actor, he had this methodology, acting method, and he can reach. And there's other people play these terrible roles, but they play so many, and they still learn that acting skill. So I think people can achieve perfectionism in a different way. Maybe you can try to achieve every single time, but you can perfect one part of your things at a time. Then you give yourself a leeway. So in the long run, everything perfect in the end.
Thank you. Thank you, Zheng. Let's see. I want to reread this last one. Evanik, would you read the last one?
Sure. Nameless Virtue. Miyamoto Musashi wrote in the Book of Five Rings, the primary thing when you take a sword in your hands is your intention to cut the enemy, whatever the means. When you parry, hit, spring, strike, or touch the enemy's cutting sword, you must cut the enemy in the same movement. It is essential to attain this. If you think only of hitting, springing, striking, or touching the enemy, you will not be able to actually cut him. More than anything, you must be thinking of carrying your own movement through to cutting him. Every step of your reasoning must cut through the correct answer in the same movement. More than anything, you must think of carrying your map through to reflecting the territory. If for many years you practice the techniques and submit yourself to the strict constraints, it may be that you glimpse the center. Then you will see how all techniques are one technique, and you will move correctly without feeling constrained. Musashi wrote, when you appreciate the power of nature, knowing the rhythm of any situation, you will be able to hit the enemy and strike naturally. all this, and then I can't see the bottom. I
This
think my bar is in a way.
is the way of the void. Okay, let me stop sharing. So comments on the whole. What did you get from going through these 12 virtues of rationality? What are your thoughts about it? What do you think? Next up is going to be Evanik, followed by Brian. Evanik.
So my thought is that quote at the end, I really got this time. I didn't get it completely in the beginning, but I got it. And I think the enemy that he's talking about is like anything that's hindering you. It's anything that's holding you back from learning new ideas and listening to new ideas. And I like the idea of the movement. It's like you have to be quick, like it has to be defined and it has to be definite. Like you can't be thinking about anything else while you're doing it. You can't short change it. If you're going to do it, if you're going to cut it off, be precise about it, be swift about it, and just do it and move on. So I love this. And I think that's not the only thing, but it's like the biggest thing that I'm taking away from tonight is to cut things off that no longer serve.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Evanik. Next up is Brian, Shane Murray, and Joe. Brian.
I was really impressed by this essay and the really the thought that went into it and the effort to get it down to such a brief statement. I think it is important to integrate all of these things. For example, on each of these, and to get it so short, I think these are like bullet points. I felt like he was talking about different aspects of perfection, different aspects of simplicity. They could be broken out and separated with bullet points because they're different facets or dimensions of each of these elements of virtue. So I think there's work that needs to be done by the reader and the actor in putting all of these things together. It's not a simple recipe.
Yeah, absolutely. He's written a 3,000-page book explicating all of this. So, you can, but the thing I like about this, he's also done like he's written fiction. He's written like a novel trying to show this as well. So, but this is the most concise presentation that I've seen. Next up is going to be Shane Murray, followed by Joe. Folks, I would love to hear what you got from this. So go ahead and type exclamation mark if you'd like to share. Shane Murray.
Yeah, so I was just thinking, like, conclusively, it seems to suggest to me that all of one's efforts must be aimed toward the unification of self with one center or the center.
Yes, wonderful, wonderfully put. I fully agree. And that's what I get from the quote about the unnamed virtue. You're saying that all virtue is one, and you're trying to look for the center, and you are going towards the center, and that's all you're going for. Like all the other things that you're doing, your thoughts, individual thoughts or individual feelings or individual actions, individual intuitions, those are all pieces that will enable you to get there. And if you keep that in mind, then you're going to, then you're doing something. Otherwise, you're just frittering away your energies. Next up is Joe.
Yeah, I like what you said as well. It's this idea of essentially wisdom, and that's the virtue that I thought of the most throughout this whole passage. Is that what are we trying to do? We're trying to look for wise action, how to apply knowledge in the world, and then this gives us a very interesting. I thought it was a fabulous framework that shows, okay, abandon what your beliefs are, abandon what your emotions, and kind of look at the world objectively in order to assess it so that you can actually, act in the world. And I especially like the idea that he used curiosity as the basis for all this, and what curiosity, and defined what curiosity was. And I think that this maps into the diagram very nicely. That's the thing that I was thinking the whole entire time, is how you could see the destruction part, you could see the creation part, and you can also see this element of where is it? It's just the idea between the movements, the first two movements, where drifting can settle in. You can see every single part of that throughout the entire throughout the entire piece, and being able to map that visually so simply onto your diagram. I mean, it's a testament to the diagram, but it's very interesting to see that now how these things are starting to connect again. You're starting to I'm connecting the visual with the words, and that's something you've been doing pretty regularly. I mean, but
let us do that. What we'll do is that let's do that. DLJ, if you could make a brief comment, I'm going to go ahead and go to the next thing of trying to map these 12 concepts into the diagram. DLJ, go ahead.
Yeah, I can do brief. I'm all right with that. A couple of thoughts. One was definitional, the other was applicability. So the definitional one, the word truth came up a lot. There's different kinds of truth. There's a kind of mathematical truth, true, false kind of thing, which I think is what they're alluding to. There's the other kind of truth, which is often referred to, it's true for me, capital T, truth, where people are kind of really embedded in a particular, culturated into particular notions that they wouldn't be able to give up, which is kind of also what he's getting at. So I don't know whether the 3,000 page, or was it 3,000 word?
Yeah,
book,
it has at least 100 pages on it.
Does it define truth in the book?
Yeah, there is about
Okay.
100 pages on it.
Oh, excellent. Well, it might be worth reading. And the other one about applicability. I'm thinking the people who are going to be receptive to these ideas are probably already doing them. The people who are going to be less receptive are the ones who are not going to be doing them, and probably not even listen to the idea that it's a good idea. So I was wondering how does that message get across? I haven't got an answer to that. It was just the thought that popped into my head. Thanks.
I mean, that's pretty much true of like most ideas. Like most ideas, generally what happens is that there are things that resonate to some extent. And then if it's a good idea that actually fleshes it out, shows you the foundations of it, shows you the implications of it much more. So there has to be something that the person, it relates to. And that's true for transmission of any idea, good or bad. So absolutely. Let me go ahead and start sharing the screen. I want to just do this very briefly. Let's see, not this one. Escape, go back here, and share screen. Okay. All right. So let's, I want to do this in an interactive way. So let's look at just the list of virtues here, okay? So curiosity is mostly here. This is the thing of you going back to the center. In some ways, curiosity is all of this. It's kind of returning to the center. What is it? What is it? What is it about everything? That's what curiosity is about. The next one was humility. Humility is accepting that you can be here, of saying that, you can be set in your ways and you can be away from the center, and accepting that. Empiricism is all about this S part of saying that anything that you have to both see the base of it in reality, in concretes, and you have to be able to apply it to concretes. He emphasizes the part about applying it to concretes. Scholarship, what he's saying is, it is actually connected to the argument point. It is saying that there is this rich context which lies in the culture, take all of that in. So scholarship applies this point to knowledge as such, whereas the argument applies it to through the people that you know, get whatever knowledge you can. This is a point about that we are social beings, so we can learn a lot from others. The next group, Relinquishment, is all about this of, destroying, being willing to give up things that do not go towards the center. So, and this actually clears up the ground. It's also connected with the point that we saw with simplicity. Simplicity is relinquishing things which do not capture it as well, and relentlessly going towards, and it clears up the ground for creativity, clears up the ground for much more powerful way of looking at it. Next up is lightness. Lightness is actually very close to the relinquishment. It is simply like a stylistic way of looking at relinquishment, saying that just take it within your stride. The evenness is all about saying that, you're going to get attached to your ideas. You're going to get attached to your ways of doing things. You're going to get attached to your emotions. When there is something other than that, do not impose higher standards. Use the same standards. The argument we already covered, it is about kind of the social angle of it. The precision is very interesting. Precision, simplicity, and perfectionism are more properly of this area. It applies everywhere, but he's focused very much, precision is like the heart of kind of TI kind of thinking, the introverted thinking of trying to make sure that you got things right. And this faculty is what is being focused on. Simplicity is very interesting point. I work with it with my diagram all the time. If you can remove as much, I think of it in terms of concentration to capture both kind of simplicity and comprehension. It is a way of, it's a way of, like the term that Leonardo da Vinci has is excellences upon excellences. So you concentrate everything. It's so that it becomes a seed from which many things can come. So that's how I think about simplicity. And perfectionism is simply your commitment to the center, commitment to truth, as you move towards that. So I find it to be a great formulation. The reason I picked to look at it, decided to kind of think about this, is that though that it is something that is focused on thinking, it's about virtue of rationality, but you can see that it has advice about what to do about action. That's a very large part of it. It has tremendous amount of advice about what to do on emotions and how to integrate emotions into. It doesn't talk that much about intuitions. It kind of lumps it together with emotions. So that's something that is not focused on, extensively. His ideas about this part is far greater than my ideas. Even his application to this, to S, is much higher than mine, his level of precision of thought. I'm now not just talking about this particular essay, but just his entire work is largely here. It is really powerful on this front. He has some basic observations here about emotions. There are other systems which do a very good job, like CBT, for example, has a much more elaborate way of saying what he has said. And there isn't that much focus that he has on this intuitive part. So that's my quick take on this. And now I want to open it up for any comments about the diagram and any idea that he talked about that relates to it. Joe.
So you took all the ideas. So, I mean, but that's okay. I think one thing that he talked about is the idea of being skeptical when it's convenient and how that could be destructive as well. So that there's that destructive element that he captures, which would be at the bottom of the heart there. That was, you know, kind of rock bottom, where you're acquiescing to your own desires to be right or to your beliefs. So I think that what he's also captured very much is the dark side of these virtues, the vices, the things that pull you away from virtue as well. Since, you know, and I thought that you captured the virtues themselves brilliantly. So I don't know if I can.
Let me add one thing. Sorry to interrupt. You can continue. I would just want to add one thing. You know, I was struck by how much of these virtues talk about the necessity of destruction. You know, again and again, he keeps coming back to it. That don't hold on to things. You know, focus on the center, focus on the truth. Let that guide you and give up whatever you need to give up in order to get there. I think that part. Go ahead, Joe.
Oh no, I mean, I didn't have much to add. No, the destruction aspect of it as well. Yeah, that he captured that almost very similar to almost the way Boyd does, and I mean, that's the best way I can put it at the moment.
Thank you. And he, in the build area, the point that really struck for me was on his work on, you know, his thoughts on precision. That is really, I thought that was really great. Next up is Maritza, followed by Shane Murray. Maritza.
What struck me most about these 12 virtues is it seemed that there's an overarching banner saying that it's just not rational to hold tightly or rigidly onto anything. I find that each one of these virtues encourages us to shift a perspective, to consider a change, to analyze, you know, something that we're holding tight. So I find that these are very much the movement within your diagram. And they, you know, I can see them interwoven within the fabric of everything else that your diagram is presenting for us. And I like that because, you know, it says that they're the 12 virtues of rationality. And what I'm hearing here is that it's just not rational to stand still. You have to always move. And if you're moving, it stands to reason that you should question something, whether or not there's an improvement to be made, an adjustment to fine tune, something new to reach for.
Wonderfully put. That's beautiful point. Absolutely true. You know, when I draw these lines, you know, these are all flowing, you know, and they flow from one thing to another, and there is this continuous flow. Like, you know, life is action. So the center is relentlessly producing all of these things, and they're relentlessly coming back to it, and they are relentlessly interacting with one another. So that dynamism is part of life. When you drift and get attached to the periphery, whether in your actions, whether in your thoughts, whether in your emotions or intuitions, then you're trying to actually be non-living. You're trying to hold on to the products. You're holding on to the forms. And in so doing, you're turning your back on life itself, on the center itself and function itself. Because you think, okay, you have it now. You have the product. You don't need the process which creates it. And life does not work like that, because then it just it is just foregone conclusion. It just drifts down and away from the center. So beautifully put. Thank you, Maritza. Next up is Shane Murray, Cheng, and Joe. Shane Murray.
Okay, so I'm trying to think of this in terms of, I'm curious if, so right now it seems like we're in a period of drifting, like it's quite common for people to be in a state of drifting and then in need of destruction to bypass that. But I think most of us linger in this state of drifting. And I'm wondering, does this model speak more to a point in time for humanity? Like, is it possible that we should ever anticipate that ignorance would be limited to such an extent potentially that we may live and breathe more in the upper quadrants of creating and building?
That's a good question. The thing is that, this is part of human nature, that we have all these capacities within us, and each of us chooses. So one part of it is that we always have the ability of focusing on the center. No matter where we are, we could be at any level, and we can turn and we can choose to pay attention to truth, pay attention to goodness, pay attention to the center, and move towards it. At the same time, it is full of effort. Drifting is going downhill, and that's easy. Nothing needs to be done. You would just go downhill. Moving towards the center is moving uphill. It is to create more order. It is to relentlessly work in all of this. Another way of looking at it is that this is an effort intensive project of moving towards the center. Different times have been better than other times. Same person within different areas of their life is different on these. So there are all these variations. Now, unfortunately, I do not understand the dynamics of culture or anything at all. I have just very vague ideas, which are probably wrong. So I don't have any commentary. I think that the modern world in general, there is a lot of peripheral. What we found when we looked at the scribal works is that they are focused. They're actually talking about this radiant area, which is basically virtues. Whereas people don't talk about virtues. They talk about specific products which are there, which are all in the periphery. They will talk about specific ideas. They will talk about specific material things. They will talk about how are they feeling right now. So they will talk mostly about periphery. The focus is on periphery. There were times where the focus on the center was more. So in that sense, this diagram is trying to bring back, it's trying to retrieve the scribal age, where that was prominent. And I'm hoping that more and more people will get something from it. What they get is going to be up to them. And I plan to work to kind of bring as much into this diagram as I can. So I'm taking this with today's work was something which was a modern work, but still the thing, if you notice, it is capturing the same principle, because it is really culminating. It is starting with and culminating with that virtue of one virtue, that one way. So that is the foundation that is being used for that. So in that sense, it is scribal. It is also scribal in the sense that it is integrated. It's the integration of emotions, thoughts, and actions. So thank you, Shane Marie. Next up is Zheng, followed by Joe. Zheng.
Yeah, when I was listening and looking at this diagram, I realized, consuming is actually the drifting and destroying, which is what our current culture emphasize instead of like creating and building. So even with food, we're like trying to consume, buy the convenient instead of like.
Let me elaborate on that, and then you can continue. Okay, so
Okay.
this part is building, this part is producing, and this part is just consuming.
Yeah.
Now, there is a way of consuming where you are continuously consuming in order to produce. But this is the idea that goods are here. This is the idea that saying that, oh, I don't need to do anything. It's like it's already here. And you are focused on just enjoying what is here. And that is definitely consuming, producing versus consuming. So this is producing and this is consuming without producing. Go ahead.
Yeah. So for example, the cooking, is the creating part. It's actually a lot of fun. But, right now there's that when you go to the supermarket, only the real food is on the two end of the grocery store. In all the middle, it's all processed. They're not real food. So that's all the sections of the store. 80% of them are non-healthy food. But another thing I noticed is it's interesting. We said how fast our world changes. But all those changes actually is periphery, is the technology, the tool, the thing we're using, and that's all we focused on. That's why we're overwhelmed. But if just like a big turning around, if you stand in the center, nothing changes. So you don't even be overwhelmed. So it's just the further you stay away from the center, the faster the change goes, and you'll easily be overwhelmed, throw away. So it's quite interesting. Like when you look at this diagram, maybe we stab like a turning wheel, we stab in the center, then we're fine. All the changes is just part of this. It's not no longer bother us. It's just technology phenomenon. The core doesn't change. Humanity doesn't change.
Wonderful, beautifully put. Absolutely agree. What happens is that like people who notice the change most are people who are attached to particular things in the periphery. And they say, oh, I was attached to this one, but everybody is doing this. All the world has changed, world has turned upside down, okay? But when you're standing at the center, what you're saying is that you're standing at the core of your own being. You're, again, using Bhagavad Gita, you're focused on Brahma, you're focused on universal principles. And that's what you're focused on. So the changes, there are changes, but because you are at the center, you are seeing changes from a completely different perspective, because it's like things are going around you in the sense that you are not affected by them. You're not attached to them because you are attached to the source of those things. And so it's a completely different perspective. So this is the idea that Gita calls sthita prajna. That means your intelligence is steady regardless of what is happening around you or in you. So it could be your own emotions, like you have the presence of mind and a serenity while the emotions are going like waves in the ocean, or there is a whole bunch of actions taking place around you and you're participating in it, but hold to your core. So absolutely.
Yeah, I want to add one thing. I think currently we have so many psychological problems because people don't feel they have control of the life because life changes so fast. But if people learn about the core and that's what they have control of. The Stoicism is all about the control. If you have that, then all the changes doesn't matter anymore. Then people will have less mental problems, psychological problems, or the phobia, all these things. Exactly. I think that's what is missing in the society. That's why there's so many psychological problems right now.
Great point. Talking about dichotomy of control before Joe does. So you have, it's exactly that. what happens is that things in the periphery, you cannot control. The thing at the core of you, whether you choose to pay attention, what you choose to pay attention to, what you value, your focus on the center is completely within your control. So if you are focused on the periphery, and if you are attached to the periphery, then what happens is that by its nature, periphery is not in your control. So you are going to be all over the place in terms of your emotions, in terms of your thoughts. But to the extent to which you focus on your center, the center is within your control. That is what you are. There is like, wherever you go, there you are, you know. So that's the kind of core of you, and that is fully within your control. So it is the same point about it. It is a dichotomy of control, because people think that it is they kind of look at themselves. Like, for example, another way of looking at it is that they see world as being moving outside in. That is the periphery that is going to improve their center. So they are trying to do stuff outside, hoping to fill the void which is at the core of their being. Whereas actually everything that they see outside came from the center of being of somebody who was aware of the world and did put out the effort. So person who was creating, kind of accepting, understanding life, and then building life. All things came from that. So they're looking at it exactly the opposite. They are looking at it outside in instead of inside out. Thank you. Next up is Joe.
You know, I'll have you know that I don't talk about Stoicism because I don't want to sound like I have like tunnel vision. So it's like I stay away from it. But I was thinking that the whole time, and specifically, even when we were talking about this idea of, you know, how our emotions, you know, kind of dictate our behaviors, that can tell us, you know, that basically there's an element of that's where you're not assenting to your impressions, and he talked about that a little bit earlier, is that you're not allowing your emotions to dictate what your actual actions are and what you're thinking and what you're evaluating and how you're evaluating it. So there's a degree of acceptance. There's not a degree of acceptance. There's a rational way that you're thinking about this. And if you think about it in terms of what Jang just brought up, this idea that we're kind of more society set up to have us have more destructive behavior in the sense that we're consuming more, kind of Stoicism counters that. And so that's kind of the build, but a lot of the principles that he talked about were Stoic in nature. Especially with the fact that it's based on rationality. I mean, that's which is, you know, kind of inherent to Stoicism. So the other aspect of this that I was really thinking about prior to putting my hand up, or prior to Jang's comments, was the element of simplicity in one of the points that was made. This diagram actually captures all these points. And so this is in a way is more simple than even the 12 points that he's actually, you know, spoken about. So this is important because this really kind of tells you you can aim and how you can move forward intentionally if you're really evaluating yourself on a scale. Anyway, that was just one of my thoughts, is the simplicity aspect of things.
Absolutely. I mean, the thing is that I want to now broaden it very quickly. I just want to point out to things which I will build on Sunday. The discussion of virtue is much richer than the discussion of these virtues of rationality. Virtue is just movement towards the center. We have talked about some of it. let's just recount, let me just look at these 8 virtues as I put it before. So you have, let's start with let's see where to start. Let's start where he started. Let's start with the virtues of rationality. So the ultimate virtue of rationality, which is internal thought, internal thinking, is truth. You're seeking internal truth. And why are you seeking it? Because you are going to use it to build the right world. So you're trying to, I call it moral order or something, or justice or effectiveness, or you're basically building something in the world which is right. Then at the physical level, there is, you can call it kind of effectiveness or competence in your physical action. And then in terms of internally how you act, I call it habits. So kind of building up the right habits, in specifically it is the discipline or dedication. So that would be the external virtues. These would be the external virtues. The internal virtues, mostly dealing with feeling and intuition, there is a whole bunch there. So at the core here of feeling is the feeling of devotion, which is there implicitly in this. They are saying you actually need to love reality. You need to love truth. That is a part. That's not an emotion of a kind which is in the periphery, that you feel this way about this and that way about that, but it's a much more stable emotion. It's like the devotion that a mother has to a child, which sustains itself regardless of the cataclysmic emotions that are going through her. There is something constant. So that is not there in the modern vocabulary, even that kind of emotion. So that is what Bhakti Yoga is about in the Indian tradition. Then there is emotion relating to other people, which is love, which is a very large part of virtue that we have not covered today, that we'll be covering on. So these are some of the things. And then there are virtues on this axis, which, for example, this one is on attention, your ability of focusing your attention. That is something which is the core of the Indian tradition, which the Western tradition doesn't look at much, but it is the heart of meditation. It's the heart of what is called Dhyana Yoga or Raja Yoga. That's another thing. And then there is this, which is kind of your ability of producing beautiful things, your creativity, your ability to create things which are inspiring for yourself, which catch the imagination and motivate you towards going for it, going for the center. So these are various aspects. These are very real aspects of virtue, which complete this entire cycle. So in that sense, this presentation on virtue actually speaks to some aspects of it, but not as fully. And I'm hoping, on Sunday to look at the views of virtue throughout the Western corpus. So we will look at the Greek and Roman virtues, which are mostly similar to what we talked about today. Then we're going to be talking about theological virtues, which are this red and orange part, the left side, which are the yin kind of virtues. These are mostly yang virtues versus yin virtues. We'll try to bring in virtues as seen from the Chinese perspective of Tao Te Ching. We'll also bring in the 4 yogas. Yoga simply means the way. So those are the 4 virtues, and they are in interrelations. So the 4 yogas are Karma Yoga, which is about transforming the physical world doing the right thing in the physical world. Jnana Yoga, which is about gaining self-knowledge. Bhakti Yoga, your devotion to the center. And Dhyana Yoga, being able to focus your attention on the center. So it's a much more richer presentation on virtue. I love this presentation by Yudkowsky because it does such a fantastic job of expanding the concept of rationality, firstly into virtue, and then implicitly bringing in some aspects of the other things that are supporting. And the culmination was his saying that it's the starting point and the end point is that unnamed virtue, which is the same as following the Tao or following the Brahma or following your Atma. So I see a lot of commonalities. I see that as being integratable, what he's doing. And he has done a far better job than many people in laying out what is actually needed at the thinking level. So, those are my comments, and that's what is coming up. So if anybody wants to make any final comments, they are welcome to do that. But we are already running very late. But so let's keep it brief. Shane Murray.
Just quickly, I was just thinking that a rational approach is needed when emotions are out of balance, and vice versa. So it's beautiful. I mean, he might be speaking to a system that's out of balance emotionally, and then you can see the need to reverse that. So I think there is a point of integration there for both.
Absolutely. All right, folks. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I hope you will join us for on Sunday at 2 p.m. to continue this. There are 3 other meetups before that. There is Thursday and Friday. We have a meetup on Gita. Yogeshwar is going to be doing it. And I'm really looking forward to it. We are studying Bhakti Marg on that. And then we are on Saturday. Yasuhiko Kimura is going to be back. And he's going to be talking about new philosophy, new cosmology, and new ethics for in his series on new spirituality for the future. So don't miss that. That's going to be pretty incredible. That's going to be on Saturday at 11. Right? Evanik, you had something.
No, I was just going to say thank you. This was really great. Once again, you've given us a lot to think about. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. See you folks soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.